So we're continuing. Check. Are we on? We are on. We're continuing with this look at the male sex, the male reproductive system. I spent time yesterday going through some general anatomy. We talked about spermatogenesis, how that sperm is actually formed, right? And one of the interesting things I was reading yesterday is that sperm is not fully matured even after ejaculation. It has some actual maturing, some changes that happen to the sperm inside the woman as it's doing its traveling, which I thought was very interesting. When they were first trying to do in vitro fertilization, which is basically taking sperm and an egg and putting them together in a lab and then implanting it in the uterus, they weren't having success because the sperm weren't fully matured yet. They weren't doing the job they were supposed to do. So they found that they actually had to put the sperm in contact with basically the internal fluids of the woman in order to get the sperm to mature enough so that it could actually cause a pregnancy, which I thought was very interesting. There's a word for it, capitiation or something like that. It's in the textbook, it's in here, but I thought that was worth sharing for you. So let's talk about the internal accessory organs. So you got this whole list of things that are internal. The epididymis, vas deferens, the ejaculatory ducts, urethra, seminal vesicles, prostate gland, bulbourethral gland. And we're going to talk about all these pieces. Again, your primary organ of the male sexuality is what? Not the penis, it's the testes, right? Again, we all want to go for penis, but no, it's the testes. That's the primary piece. So epididymis, what is the epididymis? Again, it's that tightly coiled tube that's lying right on top of and on the side of the testes. Yeah, let's go here. So the epididymis is this part right here, right? This and then part of this tube here.
It's also part of the tube that goes down.
It is, yeah. This picture doesn't really show it very well, but yes. Yeah, that's what it is. And what's happening here is this is the site of sperm maturation. So, again, remember that the sperm are created in all of these little pieces inside the tubules of the testes, right? These seminiferous tubules. If you look at the cross section, do you all remember this from yesterday? That you have, this is a cross section of one of those seminiferous tubules that starting from the outside of the tube is where the sperm start to be created, and then as they move downward, they're maturing, right? And then once they reach a certain level of maturity, they are then able to, like, literally swim out of that tube up to the epididymis. And the epididymis is that storage place as they continue to mature. And there really is a whole long process involved with this about the mid-piece, the motor actually becoming more efficient and able to use it better, the tail itself being able to propel it, the acrosome, the head, the helmet, if you remember from yesterday, those enzymes being put in place, all those pieces have to still mature. And it's also, again, just a storage place, because again, you're not consistently every hour, every minute of the day ejaculating the sperm out. You have to have a place where you're storing it for that use at a different point. The vas deferens is that tube that again leads from the testes all the way up and around to the urethra. Actually leads to the ejaculatory duct where it unites and empties into the urethra. Make sure I don't mix you up there. Ejaculatory duct is kind of this little combination right here. Here's where the vas deferens is going up, and then the ejaculatory duct is basically where you're meeting that seminal vesicle. So where those guys come together, going into the prostate, meets up with the urethra. That would be the ejaculatory duct. Continuing on, the seminal vesicle is a sac-like structure. It's at the very end of that vas deferens, just as it starts meeting into that ejaculatory duct. And it contains a couple of things. It's producing a fluid that is one of the pieces of the ejaculate, the fluid that comes out during ejaculation. Semen, right, that's a name for it, is made up of a number of different pieces. The sperm is one, One second. And the seminal vesicle contains a big part of this. The prostate actually contains more, but the seminal vesicle has a piece of that fluid. And that fluid has got really a couple of big pieces to it. Number one, it's a very alkaline fluid. Alkaline means basic, right? What did we say about the vagina, the inside environment of the vagina yesterday? Do you remember? It's acidic, right? It has a more acidic base, again, to prevent infections, to keep bad things out. So if I have an alkaline solution that mixes with that acidic solution, it helps to neutralize it, right? So therefore, more of the sperm will survive and actually live to make it through. Your question, Nels. Oh, already got it. Okay. Yes? No. The fluid that comes from the seminal vesicle is alkaline. It also contains fructose. Why would, and fructose is just a sugar form, right? It's a carbohydrate. Why would semen need to have this fructose in it? Energy. Energy for what? The sperm, right? Because again, all they're doing, they're just basically mitochondria factories, right? Where they're just burning up that ATP, and so they need that glucose to help produce that. Are you with me? And then also it has prostaglandins, which help to cause muscular contractions in the female tract to propel the egg. So again, you think about the digestive system, how you had these peristaltic waves that move the boluses, the food, down the tract. Well, you kind of get the opposite happening in this female reproductive tract of trying to move the sperm up. It's like basically the woman's body cheering it along. Come on, let's go. Here's the race. Here's the finish line. Come on. It's helping it along. Does that make sense? And these prostaglandins are things that help cause these little tiny muscular contractions. Not that you feel these. No. It's just small, smooth muscles that are doing this work. Yes? Yes, it's a protein. Yep, it's a protein. All right, the prostate gland. This is the big, large gland here, just inferior to the bladder. Maybe you've heard of prostate cancer before in men. This is the site of that cancer. And what does it do? What is its role? Well, it secretes a thin, milky, alkaline fluid, alkaline again, to contradict or counteract the acidity of the vagina, that enhances the mobility of the sperm, makes it easier for it to move, and again, neutralizes the acidity of the vagina. Are you with me? And a larger portion of the seminal fluid is from the prostate gland. If you had to kind of put it in order, it would be prostate, then seminal vesicle, then your actual amount of sperm that are present there. And the fourth one, the bulbourethral gland, just does a little bit of lubrication, which is the next piece here, the bulbourethral gland. Small little structure, again located right here. So again, we're down into the urethra now, past the prostate gland. And again, this is just producing some lubrication for the tip of the penis during sexual arousal. Maybe you've heard this phrase, pre-cum. That's what they're talking about, this lubrication on the end. Much more lubrication comes from the female, obviously, than the male. But there is still a little bit that does come there. So those are kind of your four pieces that make up the seminal fluid, the semen, right? The sperm, the prostate gland, the seminal vesicle, and the bulbourethral gland. These four guys. Questions there? So I'll answer actually one of the questions that was asked yesterday. So if you have a vasectomy, which we talked very briefly about yesterday, we'll do more about this in the future, where they are taking and putting a clip here, right, on that vas deferens so that the sperm cannot get up, right, cannot get out. Does that affect whether or not you can actually still have an orgasm and ejaculate? Not at all. Again, there's still these three other parts that are producing fluid that is the majority of your semen. Does that make sense? So there's really no change in the volume or the amount of ejaculate that comes out. If if there was somebody was raped and they didn't use a condom, right, when they're raping, they could still identify the person because it still has their DNA in this other fluid. Does that make sense? So it doesn't affect really at all the process of ejaculation other than there's no sperm. You can't get pregnant. Once, because you actually have tests. You have the surgery done, and then like a month or so later, you have tests where they will test your semen and see, okay, oh no sperm, you're good to go. But until that time, you still use other forms of birth control to make sure that you don't get pregnant. It just gets reabsorbed. Because again, it's a continual process of producing the semen, and we're not continually releasing it. So the body is very comfortable with this reabsorption of those products. Yeah, it's no problem at all.
So which prevents them from ovulating, right? Is that just the same thing like the reabsorption process, or does it?
So most birth control, and we'll talk much more about this, it doesn't actually prevent ovulation. It prevents implantation. So when an egg and a sperm meet, they will then want to implant in the uterus. But most of the hormonal birth control actually prevents that from happening. There are some, there may be some that actually prevent ovulation totally, but most of them work by not preventing, by preventing the implantation, not actually ovulating. You still produce an egg, you still have menses, it just is less. Yeah. Are you with me, friends? Yes?
Does all the fluid, like, from all the different glands, like, release all at once?
Yeah. Yep, yeah, that's what an ejaculation is. Yep. All that fluid buildup. Are we good? All right, let's keep going. Oh, good. So this, we already talked about a bunch of this stuff. So semen, again, 120 million sperm in 1 milliliter of semen. And again, milliliters are very small, right? They're very, very small. So that's a lot, an awful lot of semen. And again, it's the combination of all these pieces. Here's that word I was talking about. Capaciation is that maturing of the sperm, that there is still even changes that are happening to the sperm in the woman's reproductive tract, which I had not realized. I thought that was very cool. External reproductive organs. Again, we've talked about most of these, but I'm going through the slideshow here. The scrotum, again, that's that pouch of skin that's helping to hold those testes and suspend them outside the abdomen. And again, what did we say was the reason for that? Temperature, right? Because the sperm need a lower temperature to form best. We talked about the penis yesterday with the two different types of erectile tissue, the corpus cavernosum, the caverns, right? The big areas to fill with blood, and the corpus spongiosum, that spongy type tissue. It also has the urethra that runs through that corpus spongiosum that conveys the urine and the semen to the outside. And you have that enlargement on the distal end. That would be, again, the glans penis. With that covering, that foreskin that they call the prepuce, so the prepuce. Here's a picture, again, not in your textbook, but so you can see the difference between the circumcised and the uncircumcised. It is basically just this layer of skin that covers up the glands or the head of the penis. Again, no loss of function, nothing neither better or worse. It really boils down to, is your dad circumcised? You probably are. If your dad wasn't, you probably aren't either.
Was it like biblical?
Sure. Yeah, and that's certainly one of the starting places for it. Yeah. God gave it as a way to distinguish his people from others. This will be a way that you will know, that people will know that you are mine. Which meant that obviously, and again, think about it, they didn't have private bathrooms. You know, you were much more open with what was going on in your lives because you're living all together. So it would be obvious. You would see, oh, well, he must be an Egyptian or a Hebrew, you know, because of this. So yes, a way of knowing that you are mine is what God says. When does that circumcision take place? Usually in the hospital before the male baby would come home. Some Orthodox Jews, I think it's like 5 days afterwards when it's supposed to be done. But most of the time that would be, within a day or two after birth. Something that heals very quickly, a couple of days, not really too difficult to deal with. Good, 55, we're doing well. I don't know why this slide is all messed up, and I apologize for that. I'll fix it and put it back up for you. So let's talk about, again, this is erection, orgasm, and ejaculation. We've talked a bit about this, but we'll continue on. So during sexual arousal, the parasympathetic nervous system is sending impulses to increase the blood flow to the penis. At the same time, it cuts off the blood flow out of the veins. So the arteries are bringing blood in, but the veins are preventing it from flowing out. Does this make sense? It's just the wind. It's the wind carrying a bag, yeah. All right? And again, the point of that is that it's going to fill. Y'all with me? It's going to fill that erectile tissue with blood. Again, both the corpus spongiosum and the corpus cavernosum they're both erectile tissue. When blood flow is added to it, it will get larger. And so the culmination, the peak, the end of this sexual stimulation is an orgasm, which is giving off this ejaculation, this emission, this movement of sperm cells and the gland secretions into the urethra and out of the body, right? Are you with me? After that ejaculation happens, then the sympathetic nervous system will constrict the arteries, open up the veins, and get the blood flow back to normal. Pretty straightforward. Any questions there?
Does that cut off your loop of blood flow to your whole body?
Oh, no. It's very, and there is still, I don't want you to think of that it's like the blood just stays there and doesn't ever move. So there is still blood flow in the arteries out the veins, but it just restricts the vein movement. Again, because you can have erections that last for not more than just a couple of minutes. So if that blood was just stationary, like cells would die. So that would be a bad thing. And so that made me think about these commercials that you read, for Viagra or for these other pieces. If you have an erection lasting more than 4 hours, you should talk to your doctor. Ooh, man, that would not be fun. Because, again, you can cause significant damage. There can be problems in these cells if you're not getting that blood flow, that exchange of blood long enough. We good? Okay, let's continue on. The hormones. So, the hormones that are secreted in the hypothalamus, the anterior pituitary, and the testicles, these are what control the male reproduction and the development of these secondary sexual characteristics, which we'll talk about in a second. So, the hypothalamic and the pituitary hormones are what release and produce these gonadotropins, gonadotropins, that are luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone. You may remember these from the endocrine system that we learned about. Okay, these are, again, produced in the anterior pituitary, right? Hypothalamus controlling, of course. Those guys then, in the testes, work on those interstitial cells, the cells in between the seminiferous tubules, and that's where they produce testosterone. So follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates those seminiferous tubules, and then this follicle-stimulating hormone and testosterone together help regulate and help stimulate that spermatogenesis. So you're not really producing sperm until you undergo puberty. Does that make sense? Because prior to puberty, you don't really have a whole lot of testosterone in your system as a male. Does that make sense? it's that puberty piece that then increases the amount of testosterone, which leads to production of semen, production of sperm. You cool? Lots of sleepy folk. So again, androgens are the male sex hormones, and testosterone is the most abundant. There is some testosterone that's secreted in the fetus until birth. They think that helps to actually help with the development of the male reproductive organs, but then not really again until after puberty. Now, what does that testosterone do? Well, it stimulates the development of the testes. It causes them to descend. So in the baby, the testes start off inside the body as a fetus, right? And then move to the outside. And the presence of testosterone helps that. And it also is responsible for those male secondary sexual characteristics. So think about the difference between a 5th grader and a 9th grader, right? What kind of things change? Well, you get a deeper voice, you start to get body hair, you get thickening of the skin, broader shoulders, more aggressive. Does this make sense? These are what we call the secondary sexual characteristics. Like it's just, like literally, like, yeah. So it's tougher, it's stronger. You can be more manly and do more manly things without hurting yourself as bad. Yeah. There is a feedback loop for these male sex hormones. Your textbook has a real nice picture that shows this here. That again, hypothalamus and the pituitary gland are secreting this follicle-stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone into your bloodstream. And both of those guys start to get the spermatogenesis going, as well as helping to secrete the testosterone. Then there are other of these hormones that are released from the testes that would then inhibit the amount of production there. So again, it's always that feedback loop, right? We've seen these kind of diagrams like 50 times in this textbook, right? Where this is doing one thing, these are doing the opposite, and it's that feedback loop to keep everything nicely balanced. Make sense? Any questions there? I must admit, that's it for the guys. That's what we got. Pretty straightforward. Fairly simplistic. So I'm going to stop this.